Few people know the power of words quite like Carol Off. As a career journalist, including 16 years as the host of As It Happens on CBC Radio, words were her stock in trade. She says she got the idea for her latest book back in 2020 when she noticed how strident the language of our political conversations had become. Common words that we once shared had been co-opted, or as she puts it, hijacked, weaponized, and semantically bleached by extremists. Now, she's put pen to paper to take 6 of those words back. Here to talk about At a Loss for Words, Conversations in an Age of Rage is author Carol Off. Welcome.
Hello, John. Thank you.
Let's get into why you wrote the book. As mentioned, you got the idea back in 2020. And now when I think of early 2020, I think of the early days of COVID-19. What effect do you think the pandemic had on our current political discourse?
Oh, it's huge effect on it because it created so much insecurity. And when people feel insecurity, they're easily manipulated. They get confused. They get angry. They get defensive. And so, and that's normal. That's to be understood. But when those things get manipulated, which is what I was hearing in the language and the rhetoric, then you move into something far more dangerous. And that was what concerned me, was that how people's feelings of insecurity and uncertainty were actually being manipulated by others.
Now, things were headed that way anyway, I would say, going back to the 2016 election of U.S. President Donald Trump. And it turns out he's mentioned a fair bit in the book as well.
Not surprisingly, yes, because Donald Trump is a. There are other people like, well, there's no one like Donald Trump, but there are others who are tearing pages from his hymn book to use for their own campaigns, to lesser and larger degrees. But he is just such an incredible symbol of what can happen if you have that kind of demagoguery in your political system. And he's very effective. And so you see what happens when somebody has completely co-opted the language, and that people don't even know what's true anymore. They don't know, they can't tell anymore between something that's true and false. They can't figure out what's right and wrong, because that's deliberately done in order to make them, because they're easier to control in that state. And that we've seen that throughout history. That's how it works. And so Donald Trump rolls in that same direction.
Now, the book looks at 6 words in particular: freedom, democracy, truth, woke, choice, and taxes. Was it hard to narrow it down to these 6? Were there others that didn't quite make the cut?
It was volume 2 might have to come out. And even as I talk about it, everybody has a word. They say, well, you should have done this word. And I'm thinking, yeah, it was really hard to whittle it down. What I was looking for were 6 words that I thought had a story, that had history, that had it's a kind of line through our, so our liberal democracy, through our civil society. It represented something in the larger world in Canada, but it also represented something very profound in my own personal life. And I write a lot about my own experiences growing up. And so I needed words that would actually speak to that, and that I felt I owned, that they were mine. Somebody suggested I should do the word queer, because queer has been a word that's been demonized. Again, just when queer people were able to own that word and be proud of it, now it's being turned back on them. The word feminism came up, and that people, a lot of young women feel that to say you're a feminist is something that is a dirty word, and that's very distressing to them. So lots of other words were there, and I consider them, but I didn't feel I owned them in the way that I felt I owned these words.
Now, I don't want to make you go through all 6 of the words, but I want to highlight a couple here. The one that surprised me was taxes. How would you say the meaning of that has changed in recent years?
Taxes is, oddly enough, I think the most important word in the book. And it's the last one because it's the follow the money chapter. It's like, who is really behind this? When we talk about whether it's Donald Trump, we talk about these demagogues and populists and rage farmers and agents of chaos, whoever else is sort of playing in this political arena that we're in. But who benefits from this? Who benefits from the breakdown in our trust? Who is financing the discrediting of political systems and making us turn against the idea of having government. Who's making us dislike each other and unable to talk? Who gets something from that? And so the people who are the ultimate goal for people who are financing these movements is to get rid of government and taxation, but get rid of the financial obligation people pay in order to live in a civil society. Taxes are the price we pay to live in the societies that we like to live in. And so I thought, this is the game here, because you get rid of government, you get rid of taxes, you get rid of regulations, you get rid of social welfare, you get rid of programs, you get rid of charter rights, you get rid of elections, you get rid of all those things that are kind of messy and expensive, and you just turn everything over to the corporate elites, which is what we've seen in so many countries. That's exactly what happens in Russia. Vladimir Putin is the far better example than Donald Trump of where all this leads, because that's where it ends up, where you have these oligarchs who have enormous amounts of money and no responsibility to their societies, and everybody else in the society says, well, why should I pay taxes when those guys aren't? In the United States, there are the richest people in the United States, the trillionaires and the billionaires, pay almost no personal income taxes. They don't have to. The system is rigged for them, and oddly enough, they want to pay even less tax, which is astonishing to me. There was a time when I was growing up when no one loves to pay taxes. You don't say, please give me more tax. But it was just understood in my upbringing and the world I lived in Canada, that we had to pay our way. We had to pay to live in a place where the roads were safe and the schools were safe and the children were vaccinated, and we had health care, and we had things to support us, and a net to catch us if we fell. And so we didn't spiral out of control when the smallest thing went wrong, which is what's happening now. Increasingly, that net is being unraveled. And so returning our trust in the idea of that citizen equals voter equals taxpayer, that's the formula. And the efforts to discredit that formula of citizen, voter, taxpayer is something I wanted to alert people to.
Now, you mentioned the words queer and feminism earlier. One word that did make the six is woke, and that's another term that started out meaning one thing and ends up meaning another. And a good example of when you say a term has been abandoned by the people who originated it and taken up by the other side.
Yeah, well, woke, it's a beautiful word. I wish we could reclaim it. I'm not sure it can be, but woke goes back to the last century when Black people in the United States would instruct each other, be woke, be careful, watch over your shoulder, because they were dealing with all kinds of violent elements who were out to get them. And then it became a more political word of activism during Black Lives Matter, when the idea that racism wasn't just something that was around you, it was deeply embedded in the system. It was systemic. And so that was the message of woke then. But what you're seeing now is this idea that woke has been taken over by the hard right, by extremists, and not even extremists, but because we're hearing it among conservative politicians in Canada and the United States, that they're out to get the woke extremists, the woke agenda, the woke mindset, wokeism. And it's a word in France, they call wokeism. It's a word in Hungarian, woke. The woke is now used as this enemy, this hidden enemy, and so it allows being against wokeism and woke things allows you to smuggle really odious ideas into the public space. Because when you pick it apart, when you look what's behind that facade, you realize much of what's being said is racist, Islamophobic, homophobic, misogynist, and say, well, I'm not a racist, I'm not a bigot, I'm not sexist, I'm just against wokeism. And so it allows you this facade to hide behind while you say and represent all kinds of quite odious things.
Now, that kind of leads me to my next point here. The book kind of serves as a warning in some ways, too, because as you put it, we have the courage and ability to imagine more for ourselves and our societies. It's just that we're running out of time. What's at stake here?
Well, we have huge crises on the horizon. Most obviously, climate change and the effects it's going to have. But we also maybe the strong possibility that we will see another pandemic in our lifetimes. But we're also dealing with housing crises. We're dealing with people just really struggling, really having a hard time, not just with their finances and their economy, but with understanding where the society is going. It's evolving very rapidly. And so what I really would like to see is for us to start talking to each other again. But we need leaders. And I think what's really missing in the equation right now is really good leadership and compassionate leadership, caring leadership, but smart and imaginative leaders who are willing to put their heads up above the parapet at the cost of maybe getting shot down by other council culture or by the demagogues or the rage farmers, but just having the courage to do that and taking the long view and saying, where do we want to go as a society, as Canadians? What do we want to do? How do we want to live over the next few decades? And I'm not seeing that happening at all. And we need that. We need people who are going to stand up and actually represent something. I'm seeing it in the States. I mean, this took me by complete surprise because I wrote this book in a state of utter despair that I thought, well, by the time I talked to John Ackerman, he's going to say, well, this is really Pollyanna-ish, isn't it, Carol? I mean, no, people aren't going to talk to each other. They're wanting to kill each other. I didn't expect to see suddenly over these past few months that the script would be flipped. And you start having people like Kamala Harris and Tim Walz talking about rebuilding the safety net, reconnecting us with the idea of freedom as something that has responsibility to others built into it, that a love of democracy as something that includes everybody, truth, which is like the real facts of things, that I didn't expect to see that. I really thought that we were in a really dark time, and we're going to sail right into a second presidency of Donald Trump. And I don't know if she will win, or even if she'd be a good president. I just know that the message they have is making a lot of people feel joy and hope and trust in the political system for the first time in a very long time.
So are you feeling hopeful then, more hopeful than when you started the book?
Well, if I can convince Tim Walz to run for Prime Minister of Canada, I'd be, because I think he really, Kamala Harris really is very American. But when a lot of things that Tim Walz says, I'm thinking, yeah, that's a really Canadian way of seeing things. He's just a mensch, isn't he? He's just a down to earth guy who's not afraid to stand up for us. He says, like, mind your own damn business, or we take care of each other. These are messages I think that resonate with Canadians a lot, and that we're tired of being angry with each other. I'm tired of seeing trucks roar around with F Trudeau signs on them. I mean, not whether I like Trudeau or don't like him. It's so ugly. It's so angry. You just feel the anger. You feel people and they've sort of, those angry people, that rage has overtaken us. And I think it's a very small minority. The vast majority of us are kind of in the frustrated middle, where we don't want to live in a world of rage. But I mean, somebody else coined the phrase that we're in the outrage industrial complex. There's just so much to benefit the people make money from outrage, and they get political power through outrage. And I don't think as a society that's useful to us. I don't think it's even desirable on the part of most people.
Now, you say the book is neither a linguistic critique or a political thesis. I would say it's more of a field guide, but what do you think it is then? And what do you hope the reader takes away from it?
What I hope the reader takes away from it is to really start to listen to language, the language around you, the rhetoric, because it starts that way. It starts long before you have wars and conflict and extreme things that in your world. It starts years earlier with language, with rhetoric. And we learned that from what we saw with Hitler and the Nazis. We think of the Nazism being from 1939. Well, they started much earlier, 10 years earlier, seeding the language, the German language, with hate and anti-Semitism. And you see that all through these agendas, And so I think that to be aware that we are in a really early stage of something that could become really ugly if we don't take back our civil language. We don't listen to how words are being used. And the danger is that it's this emotional language. It's this rhetoric of appealing to our emotions, our feelings, and not our rational selves. I mean, that there's no money to be made in being rational and reasonable for social, the big techs, the social platforms. There's money to be made in having us angry with each other, and I think that we want to have rational, cohesive, important conversations with each other. And we have to push both the ideologues out, and we have to decide that big tech isn't going to drive our lives as much as we've allowed it to be.
Use your words, a phrase you borrowed in the book.
Yeah. Like we say to our kids.
The name of the book is At a Loss for Words, Conversations in an Age of Rage. It is published by Random House Canada. My thanks to author Carol Off.
Thank you, John.